In many mediums of storytelling, riches and wealth are often synonymous with gold. One of the earliest depictions of this is the story of King Midas and his golden touch from ancient Greek mythology. You've probably heard of the name Midas in other media, often related to the element gold in some way. At its core, the story of King Midas is one of greed or avarice. Nevertheless, it still remains one of the most recognizable and fascinating stories nowadays. Midas was the king of Phrygia, a beautiful land full of rose gardens. King Midas had everything your average mortal wished for, but of course, he wasn't average. He's often seen walking around in his castle or about in the city adorned in jewelry and gold accessories. Midas loved the splendor and glamour they exude. He loved wearing and surrounding himself with them. There couldn't be enough gold in the mortal realm to sate his desire for it. Though his riches were abundant and overflowing, he was never satisfied with how much gold and diamonds he had. One day in Phrygia, his servants found an old satyr by the name of Silenus sleeping in one of Midas's rose gardens. Silenus was a close companion of Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, who Midas was an avid worshipper of. Silenus had become drunk from all the roses in the garden, as satyrs do I suppose, and was sleeping soundly when he was found. So the servants playfully made a wreath of roses, crowned Silenus with it, and also decorated him with rose petals. After they had their fun, they brought Silenus over to King Midas. Seeing as Midas worshipped Dionysus, he immediately recognized who this drunken satyr was. After Silenus woke up, Midas welcomed the satyr into his residence and entertained him for 10 days straight. When they had finished partying, he called out to Dionysus to deliver Silenus back to him. Getting his close companion and tutor back pleased Dionysus greatly, so he offered to grant King Midas a wish. Now King Midas was a greedy man. Even with all his riches, he still craved for more. He wondered of a way he could gather more gold to surround himself with more of it, and he came up with an idea, a very stupid one. You might think that a king would think things through before making a decision, but King Midas was a fool. He wished that everything he touches turns to gold. In his head, it was the most genius idea. He didn't have to gather more gold if everything could be turned to gold instead. Dionysus was perplexed at Midas's wish. Surely he knows, right? If everything he touched turned to gold, he could never eat or drink anything by himself ever again. The gods and goddesses in Greek mythology are fickle, cunning, and sometimes downright cruel. But Dionysus didn't display any of those qualities. In fact, he was benevolent enough to double-check and ask Midas again if he was sure of his wish. With certainty and giddiness, Midas confirmed his wish, and so Dionysus reluctantly obliged. Midas went to sleep with hopeful anticipation, as his wish would be granted tomorrow. When dawn came, Midas woke up and immediately touched a table closest to him. Sure enough, the table turned to gold at his touch. Midas was ecstatic to wield this powerful gift, and he touched everything in his vicinity with a mad fervor. Everything turned to gold without fail. With a spring in his step, King Midas went to his rose garden to smell the roses, something he had a habit of doing every day. He bent down to pick a rose, but the moment his fingertips touched the rose, it turned to gold. A gold rose might be a beautiful sight, but its floral fragrance was lost. Midas was a bit saddened at the prospect of not being able to pick up roses anymore, and he also started to feel uneasy. When time for breakfast came, Midas sat at his usual dining table and picked up a grape to eat. As he chomped down on it, he felt his teeth bit down on something hard. Yeah, the grape turned to gold too. Then it dawned on him how foolish his wish had been. The king was blinded by greed and didn't think his wish through. Now he couldn't eat or drink anything by himself anymore. As he was regretting his wish, his beautiful daughter came to greet him. Midas saw her and went to hug her, seeking relief. His worry and anxiety clouded his judgment and briefly made him forget that he still had the golden touch. His hug inadvertently turned his beautiful daughter into a golden statue. Cursing his own stupidity, Midas learned his lesson and begged Dionysus to rescind his gift. Dionysus took pity on Midas and told him to go to the river Pactolus and wash his hands there. He also told Midas that everything he touched that turned to gold would also turn back to normal. Midas promptly went there and did as he was told. Submerging his hands in the running river, he saw gold swirling out of his hands and following the river stream. The people downstream saw this and spread the news of golden water streaming down Pactolus River. This is the origin story of why there's so much gold on the banks of Pactolus River. After a few moments had passed, gold finally stopped flowing from Midas's hands. As he reached his home, his daughter came out to greet him. She and everything Midas turned to gold had turned back to normal just as Dionysus had said. Midas then swore that he wouldn't be so greedy anymore, as greed had only brought nothing but distress for him. While Midas's obsession with gold had faded, his stupidity apparently hadn't. One day he was asked to be the umpire of a musical match between Apollo, the god of music, and Pan, the god of nature. While Pan had been phenomenal at playing his reeds, Apollo was the god of music himself. None could beat Apollo's musical prowess. That was common sense. Nevertheless, King Midas said that he liked Pan's reeds better. Everyone, Pan included, was shocked to hear his evaluation. Apollo, of course, wasn't pleased with his judgment, so he turned Midas's ears to a donkey's ears. Apollo said that he merely shaped Midas's ears to its appropriate form. Embarrassed, Midas ordered a custom cap be made that he always wore to hide his ears. Only a few had witnessed his donkey ears, one of which was his personal hairdresser. Midas had made everyone who knew of his embarrassing secret to swear not to tell a single soul, but his hairdresser couldn't handle keeping it a secret, so he went into the fields near the city borders, dug a hole in the ground, and whispered the king's secret into it. Technically, he kept his oath, but when spring came and reeds grew from that field, it would recite the hairdresser's words every time wind blew through its leaves. After that spring, everyone in the city became privy to the foolish king's poorly kept secret. There's a lot to learn from King Midas's story. Most modern media portray Midas's folly more severely, often making the antagonist character that represented Midas to accidentally touch themselves and turn themselves to gold, crystal, stone, or some other element. The main moral of the story remains the same though, that greed would ultimately destroy its master in some capacity. Though one might argue that if Midas had thought his wish through more carefully, he would have gotten what he wanted. In that case, the lesson to learn would be to think first before we speak.